I still remember standing in that hallway, soaking wet from the rain, holding my work badge like it still meant something. I had just lost my job 2 hours earlier. I'd sat in my car in the parking garage and cried until my chest hurt. Then I drove to the one place I thought would feel safe, the house I grew up in. The house where my bedroom still had my name written in marker on the doorframe from when I was 7 years old. I thought I just needed 5 minutes. A glass of water. Maybe a hug from my mom. But when I stepped through that front door, my father was standing in the middle of the living room holding a cardboard box. My cardboard box, filled with the few things I'd kept stored in my old closet. A couple of sweaters, an old journal, some photographs. He set it down at my feet without a word, and then my sister Danielle walked around the corner, crossed her arms, and said, "I want you to really hear this," she said. "Who's going to pay my car loan now that you're out of a job?" "Because it sure isn't going to be me," my mother, standing behind her, nodded. I looked at all three of them. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I picked up that box, walked back out into the rain, and I smiled to myself the whole drive home, because none of them knew what I owned, and they were about to find out in the worst possible way. Let me back up and give you the full picture, because this story didn't start that rainy Thursday night. It started years before, when I first understood what kind of family I had actually been born into. My name is Mara. I'm 27 years old. I grew up in a middle-class house in Georgia with my parents, my father Raymond, and my mother Susan, and my younger sister Danielle, who is 3 years behind me and has spent her entire life being treated like she was made of something more precious than the rest of us. From the time we were little, the favoritism was there. Danielle got the new clothes. Danielle got the bigger bedroom. Danielle's school events came first. When she dropped out of community college, my parents said she just needed time to find herself. When I graduated with honors, they came to the ceremony, took one photo, and left early because Danielle had a hair appointment she didn't want to reschedule. I learned early to take care of myself. I worked through college. I saved aggressively. I built a life that didn't depend on anyone handing me anything, because I already knew no one in my family would. And then, 3 years ago, something happened that changed my trajectory completely. An elderly woman named Dorothy N., who had lived 2 doors down from us my entire childhood, passed away without any living relatives. She had watched me grow up. She had seen me, really seen me, in ways my own parents never bothered to. When her attorney contacted me, I found out she had left me everything she owned, a small property management company called In Coastal Holdings, and 3 assets registered under it, including a breathtaking beach house on the North Carolina coast that my family had rented once for a summer vacation and talked about for years afterward. I told no one, not because I was scheming, but because I already knew what would happen if I did. I was right about that too. I had worked at a regional advertising firm for 4 years, account manager. I handled 6 major clients, built 2 of those relationships from scratch, and consistently pulled the highest performance scores on my team. But when the company brought in a new VP who wanted to reshape the department in her own image, I became collateral damage in someone else's power play. My termination came on a Thursday at 4 in the afternoon. No warning. A 30-minute meeting and a folder of paperwork slid across a conference table. I drove to my parents' house because my apartment suddenly felt too quiet and too far from anything familiar. I wasn't even planning to tell them what had happened. I just wanted to sit somewhere that felt like home for 10 minutes. Instead, I walked into an ambush. My father had decided that very day, apparently, that Danielle needed my old room, even though she'd been living there off and on for months already. They had taken it upon themselves to box up the last remnants of my presence in that house as though I were a tenant who'd been quietly evicted. And when Danielle said what she said about the car loan, her car loan, the one I had covered twice already as a quote-unquote favor, my mother looked me in the eye and said, "You've always figured things out, Mara. You'll be fine." She meant it as a compliment. She had no idea it was the last straw. Dorothy had left me the company 2 years before I lost my job. And in that time, I had done a great deal with it. I'd hired a property manager, updated the rental listings, brought in a local attorney to handle lease agreements, and slowly increased the revenue from all three properties. The beach house alone generated serious seasonal income. I had also, by that point, begun the process of expanding, looking at a fourth property, building relationships with a small boutique hotel group interested in a partnership. I had an accountant, a business bank account, and a legal structure that was entirely mine. My family thought I was just a woman with a good salary and a modest apartment. They had no idea I was quietly building something that would outlast any corporate job I ever held. The night they handed me that box in the rain, I drove home, changed into dry clothes, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I looked at the Coastal Holdings dashboard for a long time. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going to blow anything up. I wasn't going to call them screaming. I was going to do something far more effective. I was going to simply stop. Here's what my family didn't know and had never thought to ask. For 14 months, I had been quietly covering a portion of my parents' electric and water bill through an arrangement I made directly with their utility provider. I'd set it up after my dad's work hours were cut and my mom mentioned offhandedly that the bills were getting hard. I didn't tell them. I just fixed it. I had also paid Danielle's car loan twice, once claiming it was a birthday gift, once just because she cried on the phone and I was tired and gave in. I had helped my father through a tax issue 2 years prior by connecting him with my accountant and covering the associated fees. None of that had ever been acknowledged. Not once, not with a thank you, not with awareness, not with anything except the continued assumption that I would always be there to plug whatever hole had opened up that month. The morning after the porch incident, I called the utility company and removed my arrangement. I did not call my family to tell them. I just stopped. About 3 weeks later, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was Danielle. She was practically hysterical. The car had been repossessed overnight. She had gone out to the driveway and found nothing but an oil stain. She told me about it in a rapid, breathless torrent of words. The repo company, the embarrassment, the fact that their neighbor had watched the truck pull away. Then, without pausing to take a breath, she said, "Can you just cover the overdue amount? It's only like $800. I let her finish. Then I said, "Danielle, I'm actually not in a position to do that right now." She went quiet. "What do you mean? You always have money." "I lost my job," I said. "You were there when Dad handed me that box. You were the one who asked who was going to pay your car loan. Do you remember saying that?" The silence on her end was loud. "I'll figure it out," I said, the same words my mother had used on me. "You always figure things out." I hung up gently and went to make coffee. 2 months after the porch night, I received an email through the Coastal Holdings inquiry inbox. It was from my mother's personal email address. She had found the beach house listing online, the same house our family had vacationed in years ago. The one she still talked about as her favorite place she'd ever been. She didn't know it was mine. She asked about summer availability. She asked whether the owner might be flexible on pricing for a large group booking. She signed the email with a smiley face and told the property manager she hoped they could work something out because her family really needed a good trip this year. I sat with that email for a long time. Then I responded through the business account, professionally, warmly, with no indication of who I was. I quoted her the full market rate of $4,400 for the week. I noted that a security deposit would be required up front. I thanked her for her interest and told her the property was very popular in July. She replied asking if there was any discount for returning customers or families in need of a little grace. I wrote back that, unfortunately, our pricing was fixed for the season, but that we hope to accommodate her in the future. She never booked it. I sat back in my chair and breath. In the 5th month, Raymond called me. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up, and I'm glad I did. because that conversation told me everything I needed to know about how deeply nothing had changed. He talked about the bills. He talked about Danielle's situation. He mentioned that things were tighter than expected and that it was a difficult season for everyone. He talked for about 6 minutes straight without asking me a single question. Then he said, "I figured by now you'd have something new lined up and could pitch in a little." I kept my voice completely even. "Dad," I said, "when you handed me that box, was that your way of telling me I wasn't part of this family anymore?" He stuttered. "No, that's not. We just thought you were capable." "I am capable," I said. "Completely capable. Which is why I've been fine." "So you're okay?" he asked. "Doing really well." Actually, I said and I meant every word. It came out the way secrets always do. Through a coincidence nobody planned for. My mother ran into a woman named Carol at their church's Thursday morning group. Carol had a daughter who worked in commercial real estate. And somehow the conversation turned to coastal property markets. And somehow my name came up in connection with a property deal that Carol's daughter had heard about through a professional contact. My mother came home that night and told my father that apparently Mara had some kind of business, a property company, something on the coast. My father looked at her and said, "What?" She didn't have details, just fragments. But the fragments were enough to unsettle everything they thought they knew about me. That weekend, Danielle got on her laptop and started searching. She found the N Coastal Holdings website. She found the listings. She found the beach house, the exact one, with the wide porch and the outdoor shower and the blue shutters listed under the company's management portfolio. She called me at 9 on a Sunday morning. "Is this yours?" she asked. Her voice had something in it I had never heard before. It wasn't anger. It was closer to disbelief. I took one slow breath. "The company is mine," I said. "Yes, and the beach house." That too. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, quietly, "We asked for a discount." "You did," I said. "I quoted you full price. My father called and asked me to come over." Not demanded. Asked. That alone told me the dynamic had shifted. I drove over on a Tuesday evening. My mother had made dinner, which was her way of trying to create neutral ground. Danielle sat at the table looking at her hands. Raymond sat at the head of the table with the posture of a man who wasn't sure where his authority had gone. I sat down and waited. My father started talking. He said he hadn't known about the company. He said he hadn't realized how much I had been managing quietly on their behalf. He said he thought I had always just been good at landing on my feet and that it had never occurred to him to look closer at how I did it. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over mine. She said, "I think we made you feel like you didn't matter as much." Her voice broke at the end. I didn't pull my hand away. I didn't perform forgiveness I didn't have yet. Either, I said, the night I walked in soaking wet from the rain. "After losing my job, and you handed me a box, I needed 5 minutes. That's all I needed. And instead of 5 minutes, I got the door. Nobody spoke. I'm not here to punish any of you," I said. "But I also won't pretend that didn't happen." Danielle looked up then. Her eyes were red. "I said something awful about my car loan." "I've thought about that a lot." "I know you have," I said, and I believed her. Not because she'd changed overnight, but because sitting there, without a safety net, without my invisible support catching everything that fell, she'd had to actually think for the first time, while my family was slowly absorbing the reality of who I had become. I was closing the partnership deal with the boutique hotel group, and Coastal Holdings signed a management contract covering 2 of the 3 properties, which brought in a stream of income that made my former salary look modest by comparison. I hired a second property manager. I brought on a part-time marketing consultant to refine the listings. I started looking at a 4th property along the Virginia coast. I also, and this one I'm proud of, enrolled in an online business program. Not because I needed the credential, but because I wanted the structure, the community, and the acknowledgement that what I was doing was real and worth developing. I moved into a new apartment, bigger, with a balcony that faced west so I could watch the sun go down over the rooftops every evening. I started sleeping better than I had in years. There's something remarkable about what happens when you stop spending your energy propping up people who never look down to see the hands beneath them. That energy goes somewhere extraordinary when you redirect it toward yourself. I was living proof of that. I made a decision the following spring that surprised even me. I offered my family 1 week at the beach house, free of charge, no strings, not because I owed them anything, and not to show off what I had. I did it because I had decided, on my own terms and in my own time, that I was capable of choosing generosity without being consumed by obligation. Those are two completely different things, and learning the difference was the most important work I've ever done. They accepted. They drove down together in early July. On the last evening of their stay, I drove down to join them for dinner. I sat on that wide porch with the blue shutters and the ocean breeze, and I looked at my family in the golden late daylight. My father raised his glass and said, simply, tomorrow. Nobody argued. Nobody redirected. Nobody used that moment as a launching point for something about Danielle. My mother squeezed my shoulder and kept her hand there. Danielle looked at me from across the table and said, I want to be someone who sees people. I haven't been that. I'm trying to be. I nodded. That's all any of us can do. I said. The waves came in steady and calm below the porch. The kind of sound that makes everything feel manageable. I want to be honest about something. When people hear stories like mine, they often want a dramatic confrontation, a public humiliation, a moment where the people who wronged you fall apart while you stand triumphant. That's not what happened. And honestly, it wasn't what I wanted. My revenge was quieter and more permanent than anything dramatic could have been. It was the moment I stopped making myself smaller so my family could feel bigger. It was every morning I woke up in my own space, running my own company, building my own future, completely free from the weight of being taken for granted. It was the look on my father's face when he realized the woman he'd handed a soggy cardboard box was the same woman who owned the house he was standing in. That look was enough. More than enough. Here is what I know now that I didn't know at 23 or 24. When I was still twisting myself into shapes that fit other people's comfort, being capable is not an invitation for exploitation. Being reliable is not the same as being expendable. And the people who assume you'll be fine no matter what, who use your resilience as a reason to withhold care, those people are not seeing your strength. They are benefiting from it without paying the cost. You are allowed to stop paying that cost. You are allowed to take everything you've been quietly carrying and put it down, and then pick up only what you choose. Only what fills you rather than drains you. Only what honors who you actually are. The night my father handed me that box in the rain, I thought it was the worst moment of my year. I know now it was the moment I was finally set free. The beach house is still mine. The company is still growing. And every single morning, I wake up in a life I built entirely for myself. And I am proud of every quiet, invisible, underestimated brick. If my story meant something to you, if you've ever been the dependable one, the capable one, the one everyone leaned on without ever thinking to ask how you were doing, leave me a comment below. I want to hear from you. And if this video spoke to your heart, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe so you never miss another story like this one. I'll see you in the next one.